Okay, so today we're going to talk about something that has shown up more and more in the real estate world online. It's FinCEN and the new reporting rules around certain real estate transactions. So if you've been hearing people talk about that online, it may have been a little bit confusing, right? Some people think it's going to stop investors from buying property. Some people think it's going to slow down wholesaling. I've seen people post like, it's the end of wholesaling, and it's not. And honestly, the truth is way, way, way simpler than that. To just break it down and boil it to its simplest thing, the rule is about transparency in certain types of real estate deals. And once you understand like how that works, it becomes a lot less scary and way less intimidating, right? So today, what I want to do is just walk you through exactly what it is, why it exists, and what it means for investors and wholesalers moving forward. Because it started this week. We are now 4 days into it. And the goal is simple, right? What is the rule, why it exists, and which deals it applies to, because it does not apply to absolutely all of them. And, what we should do about it and how we can all work together. So the good news is once you understand it, again, the rule not as scary as you might think. So what is FinCEN? Before we talk about the new rule, we just need to start with that simple question. FinCEN stands for Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. And if you understand that, that's going to tell you a lot of stuff. And it's a division of the U.S. Treasury Department. And here's the skinny, right? Their job is to watch financial activity and stop things like money laundering and fraud and illegal financial transactions. So FinCEN is not new. Banks have been working with it for years. This is where like that reporting of when you deposit more than $10,000, it has to be reported. That's a FinCEN law. So if you've ever wired money or opened a bank account or moved, like I said, $10,000 through a bank, there's already reporting in place. So not new, it's not scary, it's not something targeting investors. The government has been tracking this type of financial activity for a long, long time. What's changing now, today, this week, is that some of those rules for reporting are expanding into real estate transactions, right? And the main reason is just transparency. Some properties are being purchased through like LLCs or trusts or other entities. And in those situations, right, it can be really difficult to know who the real person is behind the purchase. And some of you are going to be like, well, David, that's the whole point. I get it, right? The point of that, though, is at the county level where your property appraiser posts information. And these two things are completely separate. Trust me, we were talking earlier, and no two parts of the government communicate with each other really well. So the goal of this rule was very simple. The government, they just want to know who's behind these property purchases. That's it, right? It doesn't stop deals from closing. It doesn't add any new taxes. It doesn't prevent investors from buying real estate. It simply means that in certain situations, some information about the buyer just needs to be reported to the Treasury Department, not to the local county people, right? Now, the reason that we watch Now, the reason that we watch rules like this really closely is because of the work we do every day. At Easy REI Closings, our team has worked over 9,000 real estate files across the country. So when these regulations change, we tend to see the impact pretty quick. So our coordinators, and they're absolutely amazing, they're working with title companies and buyers and sellers every single day. So they get to see where deals move smoothly and where things really get bogged down. And that's why understanding what is happening here and understanding this rule, because it's not a new law, it's just a change in the rules, why that matters. And once you understand it, it just becomes another small step in the closing process. So now that we understand what FinCEN actually is, let's talk about why the government even decided to adjust the rules in the first place, right? So the short answer is this. Unfortunately, some people have been using real estate to hide money. Shocking, right? If we've ever watched a movie or some of the TV shows out there. In certain situations, you can buy property using a company or like a shell entity, and that really makes it hard to see who the real buyer is. And that's the core of all of this. And because real estate deals can involve big amounts of money, right? We're not talking the $50,000. It's the $40 million purchases of some weird condo and they're laundering the money, right? Regulators really started paying attention to those transactions. And over the last several years, the government ran a test program in certain cities. So we had a meeting the other day and someone brought up like, well, I thought it was only, transactions over 300,000. No, that was the test program that led to this. And what they were studying was how often properties were purchased using companies or entities where the real owner wasn't clear. And after studying that data, the government did what they do, and they decided to expand those rules nationwide. So here we are. So now, in certain situations, the person handling the closing, your title agent or the attorney, doesn't matter what state they're in or who you're closing with, that person will need to report back some basic information about the buyer to the government. And again, I just want to be super clear. This is not stopping any deals. It's about transparency. They simply want to know who is behind certain property purchases when companies are involved. And it's really important to understand something here. Real estate investors, we are not the target of this rule. This was not a let's do away with wholesaling or we hate investors or any of that type of stuff, right? Most of us, right, 99% of us are operating legitimate businesses and buying properties through an LLC just for normal reasons, right? Normal tax purposes. So for most of us, this rule is just providing some basic information during the closing process, nothing more. That's it. And the good news is once this information is collected, and if it's collected early in the process, it doesn't slow down your deal at all. Nothing, right? It just becomes another step in that that the closing team needs to handle, sort of behind the scenes. So now that you understand why that rule exists, let's talk about the next question that people usually have and that I've been asked. What actually needs to be reported, right? So one of the biggest, again, misconceptions is that this thing came out of nowhere. It didn't, right? It started back in 2012. The government, was testing something called geographic targeting orders. So this has been around, again, like I said, for a long time. So these were reporting requirements in certain high-risk cities like New York and Miami, and they focused mainly on cash purchases through LLCs. Miami, like the drug capital of the world, places like that. And after studying the results, again, they finalized a rule in August of 2024. But like everybody was like, hey, we don't have enough time to implement this. So this is why it kept getting put off. And honestly, up until last week, we thought maybe it would get put off one more time, but it didn't. We're here. It went into effect on March 1st, and this is the new normal. So welcome to 2026. So this wasn't a thing that was rushed. It's kind of been evolving for over a decade. So the main issue that FinCEN is trying to solve is that, again, that anonymous money that's slipping in and into the real estate market. So in some situations, criminals were able to buy through an LLC with no real record of who owned it if the deal was paid for in cash and no lender. When I say lender, we're talking traditional lenders, right? People that have, I guess, rules that they have to follow. We're not talking about hard money and private money. But where no lender was involved, there just wasn't a good reporting system in place. And that was this gap where the criminals were able to slip in there. So again, the purpose here is just transparency, not restriction. Nobody is restricted from doing business. They just want to identify and ultimately figure out who owns the entity that's buying the property. So really, this is basic information that almost all of us are providing in the transaction in one place or another. And, even FinCEN, the people doing the program, they have stated that the focus is on certain non-finance transfers that avoid traditional financing oversight. So let's talk about the core requirements, right? So here's the part that most people really want to understand and where I've seen the most bad information online. Let's make it super, super simple. So the rule is usually going to apply and it shows up when three things happen at the same time. First, it's a residential property, right? Second, the buyer is an entity like a trust or an LLC, and there are or corporations, right? There are lots of different versions of this, but we'll talk in broad terms, LLC or a trust. And third, the deal is not financed by a traditional lender like a bank or credit union. I've heard people say like, well, I'm getting, private money lending, so I'm going to be exempt. You are not going to be exempt, I promise. So when those three things come together, right, the closing professional, and that I say that broadly because that could be a title agent, it could be an attorney. They're going to have to file a report. So not every deal is going to trigger it. And the rule does not stop a deal from closing. It just means that, somebody at the closing agency or the attorney needs a little bit more information about the buyer, right? So I just want to be super, super clear. There's no, if the transfer is not a death, divorce, bankruptcy, or court supervised or exempt, there is no, there are very few exemptions. Let me just say that, right? And right now, and this is something that we've got over 20 of these going right now in our office just this week. That's how many transactions we do. There is a little bit of confusion by title companies. Like it's definitely happening, but because our team is very aware and they've been studying it for quite some time, we're able to help guide these title companies through it. So again, transparency is the goal. Here's what gets reported. And it's not as dramatic as some people make it sound. It's usually basic information that already exists in the transaction, like the buyer's legal name, right? Who owns the LLC, information about the property and the purchase price, right? That's really the bulk of what they're looking for. We've had some where it's very, very simple. It's a LLC with one owner. It's like 7 questions. Now, if you get into these big entities with 109 different owners, yeah, that's going to be a little bit more complicated, right? Because they just want to know who is the person actually funding this deal and where's that money come from. So it's not about changing, the deal or how you do business, just documenting who's behind the entity and who is the real buyer. So I just want to make, again, I keep saying the same thing, but there's so much bad information out there. So, the most important thing that investors need to understand, right? You do not file this report yourself as the wholesaler or even the end buyer, right? Let me say that again. Investors and wholesalers, we are not filling out the report. The responsibility, according to the regulations, fall on the closing professional, right? And that's going to come back here in just a minute. That means the title company, the closing attorney, or the escrow agent, right? Depends. We call them all something different in different states, but it's the person closing the deal that has the responsibility, and we'll talk about in a few minutes here, bears the penalty. They are the ones that submit the report to FinCEN. So where does this show up the most, right? In the types of deals that we're all doing every day, right? Residential properties bought through an LLC. That's almost every transaction that we do here at Easy REI Closings. And if the deal is not financed by banks. So if you're in novation world, you're good. Like this, chances are this is not going to have anything to do with you. But other than that, this describes a lot of investors, right? Very few of us ever sell a property to an individual. So if I was closing on a property in my own name, David Olds, no problem. There's not going to be any reporting. That is not going to trigger this rule. But investor transactions, normal, yep. It's going to trigger all of those. But again, it doesn't stop the deal, right? It just means your closing team, us, we need to get the right information. So think of this as paperwork, not a roadblock. Not every deal triggers reporting. There are a bunch of deals that will not. So when a traditional lender is involved, think Bank of America, Regions, Rocket Mortgage, right? So that's going to be most of your novation type stuff. Or, as an investor, maybe we're selling the property, right? So banks and credit unions, they're already reporting all of this stuff. It's already being reported. So those deals, they fall outside this rule. This rule wasn't created for that. The rule mainly focuses on non-traditional finance transfers. So again, think cash, private lenders, hard money, things like that. Cool. And so what does that mean in the real world for us, right? So let's talk about myths, right? This applies only to expensive properties. That came up the other day in a question. Somebody messaged me and it was like, well, I heard it was only $300,000 and above. That was during the test. That was how they were running this, right? But now, no minimum. It's all deals. Whether you buy it for $1, $50,000, $40 million, doesn't matter. It's fully reportable, right? People are thinking, oh my God, I have to do this. I've heard it can be 100 questions and I've got to do it myself and I don't have time for all that. Wrong. It's the title company or closing professional that will file that report, not the buyer, not the seller. Now, I will say, I'll interject here, you do, to make this thing go smooth, and I'll talk to you about how we are doing it at Easy REI Closings for all of our clients. We have over 600 clients nationwide, how we're helping smooth this out, right? So our coordinators have been on this. I just met with them about an hour ago. They're doing an amazing job. It's going to stop wholesaling. No, this is not going to stop wholesaling. You can't stop wholesaling. This is just a step, not a prohibition. Our investors, like I said, we're going to close over 20 of these this week. Easy peasy. It's going right through. And, here's the thing, and this is where a lot of it is. I have an LLC, I have a trust to keep all my stuff private, right? FinCEN, they can't take that information from me. Well, that's true, but beneficial interest must be disclosed, right? And honestly, I have all kinds of trusts and LLCs. You disclose all of it in your IRS return anyways, but it's being kept in a secure database, and hopefully nobody is going to access that. So again, some additional information can be required, more than was a little bit before. Again, it's gathered a little bit before the closing, but the report is not technically filed till afterwards. And that's the key point here, right? So, our focus has been at Easy REI Closings, because we knew this was coming. Let's gather this information. Let's make sure that everybody is prepared, because we want to make sure these closings go smooth. And even for those of you who happen to be watching this, because we invited some outside people in today, if you're not using us, make sure that you are following these steps and getting ahead of it as quick as possible. All right. So for us, for wholesalers, right, the biggest impact is really on the end buyer. It's not on us, the wholesaler. The buyer, again, they're going to have to provide some information about their LLC or trust. So the best thing that we can do as wholesalers, and that we're doing as your transaction coordinator, is we want to prepare the buyer early. So on our side, when we're dealing with a file, and, let's say RJ sends over, the seller's contract, great, we're going to talk to the seller. But when that buyer contract comes in, we're starting to have extra conversations. Hey, Joe, you're working on this deal with RJ. I need your LLC docs, all of those things. Great. Hey, just to let you know, because of the new law that went in, or the new rules that went into effect with the FinCEN law, we're going to have to collect a little bit of extra information. So we want to tell them that up front just as soon as possible, because we don't want delays at closing, right? Because contracts are real things, and there are expiration dates, and we don't want anything to push past that expiration date and cost you to lose your deal. So we want no surprises by the time this deal gets to the closing table. So really, at the end of the day, for us, this is all about communication and preparation and telling everybody what the next step is. So, guys, this is a federal law. There is no getting around it. There's no shenanigans. I've seen some people post some stuff like, well, if I do this and then I do this and then I do this other thing and then I move it over and then I stand on my head and I do the upside down pineapple dance, I can get around it. You are flirting with disaster, and we will not be a part of any of those transactions, right? This is the new normal. It's just a new regulation. This is how it's going to be. But this rule comes from the federal government. It applies nationwide to all transactions, all title companies, all attorneys, doesn't matter where, they all have to follow it. This isn't something anymore that applies to just certain states or cities or markets, right? It's simply the new regulatory environment for real estate transactions today. This is it. So that's why we wanted to talk about this and explain, so that nobody's nervous and nobody's doing any shenanigans that are going to get them into trouble. So speaking of that, now that we understand the rule, the real question becomes, what should we do? And the answer is really simple, right? Make sure that your buyers understand that the rule exists, right? Because somebody's buying through their LLC or entity or trust or corporation, whatever it is, they're just going to have to provide some basic ownership information. That's the new normal. And second, collect that information as early in the process as you can, right? So if you're contracting with your end buyer, ask them, are you closing this in an entity, right? Before, maybe they would put their own personal name on it. And then, at the 12th hour, literally, 2 hours before closing, I want to put this into my LLC. That is going to be the things that screw up your closings and slow things down, right? So we want to collect it early in the process, not the day of closing, not the night before. So if that information is ready early, nothing slows down. Nobody's going to miss a beat. Closings are all going to happen. We just met with our team. We have over 20 closings. Every single one of them is going to happen on time this week. And here's a third thing. Make sure that somebody's actually managing that deal, right? From contract to close. This is what we do. But if not, you have to do it, because most deals do not fall apart at the closing table, right? They fall apart before the closing ever happens because somebody didn't know what to do or somebody didn't know what to expect. So the investors who are staying organized and understand what's happening and prepare early, hardly going to notice any change at all. So collect the information early. Make sure the info that goes on your contract is correct right from the start. So the timeline, let's talk about that. This is one of the other big questions that I was asked in the last couple of weeks. And when does the reporting actually happen? And this good news is this is actually very, very straightforward and laid out in the rules. So once your buyer is lined up, right, and the deal is moving forward, then that's when we are going to reach out and make sure that we are collecting all of the necessary information about that buyer. So again, it's going to include like identification, IDs, who's the owner, right? If they're purchasing through an LLC. And that information we are getting to the title company right away, right? The less surprises, the better. And after the closing happens, all of that data, that report that they're doing, that's going to be filed with FinCEN. Now, we're seeing this being done in a couple of different ways. We're seeing the title company collect it, right? Either from us or over the phone, key it in, and then them submit it. We are also seeing that a link is going directly to the buyer for them to fill out the information. And again, we are on day 4 of this. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So as we get further down the road, it will smooth out even a little bit more. A lot of title companies were caught by surprise with this. I don't know why, because they've been talking about it forever, but a lot of them really started scrambling a couple of weeks ago because, as I said, things, there's so many rules in government that get pushed off, and everybody really thought this would get kicked down the road just a little bit more. So the key takeaway is this, right? The information is collected before closing, but the report itself is filed by the title company, by the title agent, by the attorney after the closing takes place, which means if everything is collected early, your closing isn't delayed. Nobody's money gets held up, right? Because we'll talk about it here in a minute. The penalties are to the title company. So they will hold everything up, which means getting you paid if they don't have the information that they need. So prepare early or make sure you have somebody that is doing that for you. So how do we make this even easier for investors and wholesalers, right? On our side, it's simple. We want to make sure the process is clear from the very beginning of the transaction. I want to make sure that all of our clients understand what's going on. And as we are talking to their buyers, that they know what's happening. So that means letting the buyer know early that certain information is going to be required if they're purchasing through their entity. And this isn't unusual. It's just a very normal thing. Nobody's getting excited about it. And, most investors, they're used to providing this type of information during transactions. So we're not getting anybody excited. We're not calling people with our hair on fire. Hey, this is the new normal. This is what we're doing. And by setting those expectations up early, right, everybody involved in the deal knows what to expect. So the buyer's prepared early, the title company has the information they need, and your deal, it's just going to go forward so smooth. So when everybody understands that process up front, there's no surprises, right? And the deal closes and you get paid, which is very, 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 very important. And that's exactly where we step in, for our clients at Easy REI Closings. Our coordinators, who are amazing, they are managing this process from contract all the way to the closing table. And, this means that we're communicating with all the parties, all of them, right? And sometimes it's like cats on crack, right? All running around in different directions, right? The buyer, the seller, the title company, if there's any, lenders, private lenders, hard money lenders, whoever it is, communicating with them throughout the transaction, because this is the thing that we do every single day, 9,000 times for over 600 clients across the country. So when new rules like this appear, no problem. Like, this is what we do. Our team adapts very quickly because they've been on this for months. And right now we are making sure that the right information is collected early, right? We make sure that the title company has everything that they need, right? And we want to make sure that that process moves forward and that we compress time, that we get your deals closed just as quickly as possible. Because investors and wholesalers, you should not have to worry about paperwork and compliance, right? Especially not this. This is what we do. You should be focused on finding deals and growing the business. Our job is to help make sure those things actually close. So what do you do moving forward, right? Again, 3 very, very simple steps. 1, you're going to stay informed, right? Understand that this rule exists and that certain transactions now include an extra reporting step. Simple. 2, prepare early. If your buyer is purchasing through an LLC, a corporation, or an entity, or a trust, make sure that the information needed is reported as early in the process as possible. If you're using us as transaction coordinators, we will do all of that for you. If you're trying to manage this on your own, that's one extra thing that you are going to have to start doing. And third, work with experienced professionals, right? Again, this is one of the biggest things that we see. Always be working with a title company that understands investor closings. Make sure, right? Not investor friendly. They understand, like they actually do them. And when the right team is managing the transaction, these steps are they're handled. They're handled smoothly, and the deal, it just keeps moving forward just like always. So investors who stay organized, right, and they prepare, honestly, not going to notice anything, right? Barely, especially our clients at Easy, they're not having any issues at all because we've been preparing for this and making sure that nobody misses a payday because that is our job on our side, and that's what you need to be doing. So let's quickly recap what type of deals this rule affects, because we've had some people who are just coming in here, and which ones may require reporting under this new rule. So many traditional transactions, yeah, right? They don't. So novations, you guys, you're safe. You're over on your own island. But deals involving financing, through hard money, private money, they are going to be affected. Deals financed through a bank are usually already covered by this through the banking systems, rules that have been around forever. So the key thing is this, right? Not every transaction will need reporting. But if the rule applies, the process is very straightforward. There's no getting around it. It's a federal law. The information is collected. The report is filed. Everybody moves on about their life. We all get paid, and that's it. And then we can complete the deal. So as we wrap up, this is the main takeaway, right? Again, if you've listened to this, you're like, that's it? All those posts online? That was all of it? Yeah. The rule is simply a new reporting step for real estate transactions. It doesn't stop the deal, right? It doesn't change the fundamentals of real estate investing. Nobody's doing away with wholesaling. They're not coming after us. It doesn't prevent wholesalers or investors from doing business. It just simply means that in some situations, just a little bit more transparency is going to be required. No bubbles, no troubles, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It's going to be fine. The good news is when it's handled correctly and everybody understands what's going on, it's just another small step. But making sure your buyers understand is important, because some of these buyers, they may not have bought anything for a year or 2 years or 5 years, right? This happens. We've all seen this. So for those buyers, they may not be in the know. They may not be as up to date as we are. So it's up to us to make sure that we explain them to them, because they're going to be like, I didn't have to do this last time I bought a deal. What are you talking about? Well, that's okay. It's new law. And this is where we want to step in and be able to make sure that your transactions are going smoothly. So at Easy REI Closings, our goal, very, very simple, right? Help investors close more deals, close them faster. And I want to remove as much stress from all of you guys as we possibly can so that you get to the closing table and you get paid, because that's why we do this business. So, if you're an active investor or wholesaler, if you're working with us, you are good. There is nothing you need to do. Like I said, we invited a lot of people into this because it's very, very important and it's super timely. If you're not working with us, we would love to. That's our phone number. You can make a direct dial to us, or you can go to Easy REI Closings and book a call and get some information. But listen, all of us, right? Our job as investors is to keep these deals moving forward, because the opportunity in real estate investing is so, so huge. Yesterday, I took some notes on a call with Brent Daniels, and there were 948,000 Google searches for Sell My House Fast last month. That's a lot. There are 10 million distressed houses in the United States. There is so much opportunity for all of us out there. That's the goal. Let's go out there and help some people and make sure that, that one, we're helping them out of distress. They're all losing sleep. Let's help them. Let's do some deals. Let's make a lot of money. And that is it. As an additional resource for you guys, we're updating it tomorrow, and there will be a new version coming out. If you go to thewaronwholesaling.com, this is a complete breakdown of all of the states and all of the state regulations that are enacted that have to do specifically with wholesaling. So if you go there, you can download this now. As we put out a new version, you will get that emailed out to you, so that you always have the most up-to-date version of no nonsense, no bullshit, what's going on in each market, and what is the fix, right? How should we be doing business in that market? So